Every once in a while, I see a trailer to a movie that looks interesting, but I'm kind of on the fence about it. Of course, I'm going to give it a shot anyway, but I don't expect much from it, if that makes sense. I.S.S. is one of those movies. I went to the theater, sat down with two of my friends, and watched everything play out, and I was genuinely surprised. My friends and I walked out of the theater fulfilled. I.S.S. isn't a complicated film by any means. It doesn't have a massive budget, clocking in at only $13.8 million. Even its largest actress, Ariana DeBose, is only in a couple of films such as the recent Argylle and West Side Story. In just about every aspect, this is a smaller film, but the cast and crew made the I.S.S. come to life nonetheless. Money isn't really a deciding factor for motivation in smaller films. That's why you tend to see the cast and crew giving it their all, and I.S.S. is no different. There weren't really any emotionally taxing moments, but there was so much suspense and the cast sold it. Each action scene had weight to it. You could feel every hit, even though it was in zero gravity, which is supposed to feel weightless. Spoilers are in effect from now on. The premise of I.S.S. is quite simple. Tensions are rising on the surface, and both sides, Russia and America, have deemed the I.S.S. an asset. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, but I think the film was at its best when we didn't know for sure if the Russians had received orders. There was the time when we were just following America's POV. They had just received orders to take control of the station, but we don't know if the Russians had received the same orders yet. This was when claustrophobia and paranoia were at a peak, but it didn't last long. The mustache American was told to fix a satellite dish of sorts, and although reluctant, decides to fix it anyway. Of course, he gets knocked off the station and presumably dies. This is when peak paranoia ends and things get kind of predictable. You can kind of tell what's going to happen a few minutes before it actually happens, which isn't great for a thriller, but at the same time, everything is done differently than you'd expect, so it is still, in a sense, suspenseful. Even though I liked this movie, and it was suspenseful, it wasn't perfect, though I will say most of the issues are more nitpicks than anything. First off, there were a few continuity errors. The mustache man is stabbed with an active power drill on his lower left side, right above the hip. But a few shots later, there is no blood, and a few shots after that, blood on the right side. It was a little distracting, but after the scene, I was back to being fully engaged. Another continuity error took place in the final fight between the last Russian, the female American, and the clean-shaven American. The black American and the remaining white American charge after a knife, and the dude grabs the blade in one shot, and in the next is holding the handle completely uncut. I just think it's funny that the dude grabbed a blade with no repercussions. Secondly, why did the mustached American untether himself? And why did he only have one tether? Usually, at least with climbing, and I'd assume the same to be true in space, you have two tethers. You have one locked in while you move the other one, and then when that one's locked, then you can unlock the one that's a little bit farther behind, and then you move forward and repeat the process. But this guy only had one tether, leaving him vulnerable to the crane when he unclipped it. It felt like lazy writing for there to not be safety measures on the space station when they could have found a different way for him to die. Also, he just randomly comes back hours later, but whatever. These nitpicks broke the atmosphere temporarily, which would be a bigger problem if they were more than nitpicks. But overall, the atmosphere of this film was handled perfectly. 95% of the time, it looked like the cast was floating and you floating with them. The camera itself was freely moving, and it adds this weightless feeling to the shots. This is perfect for setting the audience into the space station environment. The set has a similar effect. The set design for I.S.S. is phenomenal. It's chaotically organized with everything being tied or velcroed down to keep it from floating. There are tubes, wires, and bags all over the place, which adds clutter without it feeling like a hoarder's house. Come to think of it, I think the clutter is used as lens dirt. But what is lens dirt, you may ask? Well, it's stuff that is placed in the frame to make the audience feel more connected to the story through the camera. Things like lens flares, condensation, glass, or metaphorically, something like a condiment stand that doesn't add literal mess to the frame but still dirties it up. I think I.S.S. did a great job at making the audience feel at home and uneasy on the I.S.S. I think the movie as a whole is shot pretty well. The dialogue for the most part is natural, and though people say it's woke, it was never a detriment to the story. I think some people just like belly aching. The score was a great addition as well, and this movie isn't my favorite ever, but it is one I will revisit soon. I'm honestly just glad there was at least a good movie in January to help quench my thirst for new movies. And that pretty much sums up my thoughts on I.S.S. I was a little worried I wouldn't get this to you guys on time because my phone, which I normally read and write my script on, kicked the bucket. But the review is here, and I'm so thankful for those that sit all the way to the end of these. If you enjoyed today's video, sending it to a friend and leaving a like is greatly appreciated. And if you haven't seen the movie, you'll watch it and see what you think. Your own opinion will always sometimes be more important than mine. Next week's video is going to be on Anyone But You, so subscribe so you don't miss out on that.